In the world of professional wrestling, there's been many dream matches that have come and gone. Through it all though, there are some matches that we just regret. Should have even happened in the first place, even though we were the ones that asked for them. That's what this video is about. So right now, let's not waste any time, let's get into it. Okay, when the Outsiders debuted in WCW, nobody really expected the ripple effect that the duo would make when they came in. They were promising a third man in their side to take over WCW, and the story was unlike anything the fans had seen. Hulk Hogan turned out to be the third surprisingly, and turned heel for the first time as the Hulkster. It was the first time he was a villain as a main eventer. In turn, he stabbed Sting, the heart and soul of WCW, in the back. A deep betrayal that sent him into the shadows for over a year. He was around, but at the same time wasn't. Sting's personality changed tremendously. Once an exciting and inspirational surfer, he was now brooding in the corner and barely saying a word. This build was well done for the big clash between Hogan and Sting. I really like the long build story they did here. It allowed for everything to reach its potential. By the end of the build in December of 1997, fans were ready to witness the culmination of the NWO's hold over WCW and Sting's redemption. When the bell rang though, there was plenty of drama with that match. There's more to talk about Sting's tan from Eric Bischoff on his podcast, and while there can be an argument that Sting wasn't too into the match himself, the main criticism from this match comes down to the controversial pinfall loss that Sting technically suffered when Nick Patrick slow counted him. It was the stupidest fumble that ended up ruining a lot of goodwill that the company had built throughout this year. It's just bizarre in itself, the whole thing, because WCW didn't get their people in order. And that's the problem with the company. Bret Hart screwed Hogan, who won clean. Sting took a boring beating, but ended up coming back on top to win the title. Great ending on paper, but everything about this match is WCW in a nutshell. They really found themselves in great scenarios and don't know how to act. It's mostly because of how the company is. The wrestlers run things, you know? The Warrior's departure from the WWF in 1996 was notable because he was strongly associated with the company. When he left in 1992, he didn't go anywhere. He stayed put and actually almost returned in 1997. However, that wasn't to be. Despite WCW's problems in 1998, the company was still running strong and having rating peaks on a weekly basis. It was slowly wearing off though after the summer, just in time for the Ultimate Warrior to save them. His return to wrestling was bizarre and centered around his feud with Hulk Hogan. This one was never going to work based on the fact that it was 1998 and the Warrior wasn't exactly the best wrestler. The build saw him terrorize Hogan and stalk him for weeks. The big problem with this one was the match sucks. I only added it here because in some ways, Hogan and Warrior's rematch is a dream match. It's just the fact that the first match they had was really good for its time and prepared tremendously. They scripted every move and sequence, and even then, it wasn't even a world beater. Warrior did help WCW's ratings with this one, but the match at Halloween Havoc is better served to be forgotten about. We shouldn't be talking about it, but that's not the point of this video. The match was horrible, it was ridiculous in every way, the fire thing was terrible, and it happened just so Hulk Hogan could get his win back. They botched the fireball spot. Horace Hogan, his nephew, came in with the worst steel chair shot you'll see. And the entire reason why they signed the Warrior was to have him lose to Hulk Hogan. That's the entire reason why they signed for the Hulkster, to get his win from the Golden Era back. It's funny because right after this match, the Warrior left WCW and it was never meant to be more. He literally regrets signing for the company, thinking to himself that it was messed up that they'd sign him just to lose to Hulk Hogan. And this match was so bad that Hulk Hogan himself came out to say that it was a part of his fault as to why the match was terrible. The best part about this entire thing is the fact that it wasn't the main event. That was DDP versus Goldberg, but then they went past time, so that's a different story. The dream matches of all dream matches in 2003, Brock Lesnar versus Bill Goldberg. It seemed like Goldberg was very uninterested in signing with the WWE. He didn't need to because he had the money and a contract with All Japan back then, but he finally gave in. What followed was an underwhelming run that took away the essence of who Goldberg was. On paper, yeah, he did well winning the title, beating Triple H, but the problem was WWE brought him in to wrestle these long matches. They should have known better. But then again, WWE is going to be like, you're going to take $1 million from me and not wrestle long matches? Regardless though, a match between Lesnar and Goldberg was always going to be explosive. It was too good to pass up because at its worst, it can be a barn burner where both men just kick each other's ass. However, nobody realized that it can actually be as horrible as it was. The build was pretty good with both men being separated, Stone Cold being the only man worthy of officiating such a match, and there's a quote from Vince McMahon that stands out to me from the build: "Not even the 82nd Airborne could maintain order in this kind of match." That sentence shows you just how much potential this match had. If it happened weeks earlier, I'm sure it would have been better. So at the time, Brock and Goldberg were leaving. With Brock, it came as a shock because he was the #1 guy, and WWE invested everything into him. He caught them off guard and was actually supposed to squash Goldberg, who everyone knew was not renewing his contract. So it led to an unmotivated match with Stone Cold being the standout. The New York City crowd showed no sympathy for two millionaires phoning in a match on the biggest event of the year in the world's most famous arena. It was a slap in the face to the customers and a slap in the face to WrestleMania itself. The only reason Goldberg won was because they were more mad and upset at Lesnar for leaving only 3 days before WrestleMania, and also the fact that if someone were to return in the near future, it would most likely be Goldberg. Horrible affair, horrible match. These guys are doing collar and elbow types as two big men. I do think if WWE did their like late 10s, early 20s formula here with the big guys having that 10-minute match or whatever, this match would have been a classic. I do think it's a bit unfortunate that it didn't go down the way it should have, because deep down inside, there is a good match in there between 2004 Brock Lesnar and 2004 Goldberg. I just know it. I just know for a fact that if these two spammed finishers and went crazy in the year of 2004 at WrestleMania 20, it would have been a classic. It's unfortunate because we did get the rematch later on, and WrestleMania 33 was a good match, but like, this one should have gone down a bit differently. There was never really a thought of a Shawn Michaels and Hulk Hogan match. They came up at different times and never really interacted, but there was always potential because Shawn Michaels was involved. When 2005 came around, the match was coming together. It brought us a heel Shawn Michaels that electrified arenas. HBK was in his element and felt very fresh and reinvigorated. For somebody who was born again and didn't really try to bring the vulgarness of his old self, Shawn Michaels did a great job in playing the role of a villain who had contempt for Hulk Hogan and everything he stood for. That white attire really stands out as a memorable look of his from the time during the Piper Pit segment. He was basically an extravagant Christian man here. The feud was so big that WWE wanted to do more than one match, but when it came time for it, Hogan could only be locked down for one match, and it was the one match that he was gonna win. So he out-politicked the icon of politicking. I almost respect it. Hogan is the LeBron James of politicking. He's the John Cena of politicking. Hell, he's the Hulk Hogan of politicking. Amazing work with this one. This is the one like I really admire. We look at the history of wrestling and stuff like that. Hulk Hogan got a main event SummerSlam match, a great build with Shawn Michaels, and to top it all off, he had a great payday in a match he ended up winning. Michaels couldn't really do anything about it but act out during the match. He oversold every move Hogan threw at him, and watching it, you'd think it was a Hulk Hogan match from 1998. And the problem was, it's 2005. He was Dolph Ziggler on steroids on this night, and in some ways, it takes away from what was a good match. A dream match that actually followed up. The only problem was that it was too cartoony for what was essentially an intense feud. Other than that, this basically belongs in the opposite video. But I thought HBK ruined it with the overselling. It was unprofessional, but then again, these are wrestlers from the 90s and 2000s. There's something else and did whatever they wanted. But yeah, I do think a part of it is a bit unfortunate, similar to the last match, or like if HBK didn't oversell, because I thought this was good. I do think a rematch would have been nice as well. I don't think they should have done 3 matches, but I think a rematch could have been nice. It would have allowed them to explore more of HBK's heel side. And again, HBK, I do think he did a little too much with this one. He knew the result. He didn't need to do all the shoveling stuff. Yeah, it's funny, all that, but like, bro, this could have been a much better match than it was. And he was a good match, actually. I actually thought it was a good match, but like the way they went about it's like, yeah, whatever. Jeff Hardy's main event push in 2008 was special. It was one of a kind and very natural, something that was slowly going away in WWE at the time. And the fans really loved Hardy's energy and presence. He was very charismatic and had a likable character, somebody that goes through thick and thin all for their entertainment. He did win the title after some back and forth between the guys in the back, but his moment was short-lived because they couldn't trust him. Matt Hardy and storyline grew jealous of his brother's success and turned on him. I mean, I get it. He was wearing the silver ECW championship. This led to a complicated story that saw Matt admit he was the one that started the fire that killed Jeff's dog, and their build didn't need that personal stuff. It was already personal as it was. They're two brothers. Why do you gotta add the dog storyline? It's so stupid. The Extreme Rules match at WrestleMania wasn't bad. It was a bit of a highlight on the show. That's only because the event wasn't that good. It didn't capture the essence of who the Hardy Boys were, and that's the problem with it. It also felt like a drag because it was basically Jeff Hardy going down to Matt's level in a time where he was doing tremendously as the most popular face on SmackDown and raising him up to his level. Even when Matt Hardy got the win, it didn't really matter all that much because, as unfortunate as it is to say, it was Matt Hardy in the year of 2009. I also do think this should have been a TLC match that would have gone down much better, and if Jeff had the title here, yeah, I think this match would have gone down much better than it was, because these two established themselves in these ladder matches and all that, and I do think it was a bit strange for them to do just an Extreme Rules match. TNA did the story much better later on, with both brothers eventually becoming crazy and losing themselves, becoming Willow and of course Broken Matt Hardy, which was a career highlight for both. Dean Ambrose was the hardest working wrestler in 2015. There's no doubts about this. He worked the most matches that year and was the most reliable guy for the job. He was all over the card. He feuded with Luke Harper, Seth Rollins, Kevin Owens, won the Intercontinental Championship, and he was in a really good place, especially with the fans. When it came time for WrestleMania though, they valued him. He wasn't in the main event because they really wanted Roman Reigns, but he got the chance to face Brock Lesnar. This was almost a perfect match for Ambrose because it was supposed to be a hardcore match. As good as things were for him, he was missing that defining moment to elevate him to an even higher level. He didn't need it, of course, because it could always come later, but it wasn't gonna hurt to have one. They hyped up the match with Ambrose getting weapons from Hardcore Legends, but when the bell rang, the match was so disappointing and left you wondering, what is this? It really felt incomplete, and it wasn't the match WWE made the fans think it was supposed to be. Ambrose didn't use those weapons and ended up being destroyed by Lesnar. Everyone expected Brock to win, but I think we all thought Ambrose would have more fight fight in him, especially because he technically won the WWE Championship against Triple H a month earlier. It was deflating to see him lose the way he did with no real fight behind it, and what was supposed to be a defining moment for Ambrose turned into a forgettable match against Lesnar. He's more interested in his UFC fight, so he wasn't going to take risks, but at the same time, he didn't feel like going for a longer match to make Ambrose look good. Because I feel like WWE, what they missed here is the fact that it wasn't on Brock to work. It was basically on Ambrose, and if they gave him a couple of more minutes here, it would be a much more memorable match, because it wasn't bad, but it was deflating. The fact that he took that F5 and lost the way he did, it felt like you were waiting for more, and it wasn't to be. 2016 ended up being a great year for Ambrose, but this match was not that. It wasn't good. Roman Reigns' push up to 2017 had gone through a lot. The man wasn't loved by the fans no matter what he did. Anything that involved Roman Reigns, the fans booed and hated. They absolutely despised every fiber of his being and would not let him go without a single second without booing. Every single second during his entrance, his segments, they hated him. His matches also had these questionable finishes where WWE wanted to push him to the very top or were scared to make him champion because of how much the fans disliked him, or hated him in this case, because let's be honest, a lot of people actually hated Roman Reigns here personally. After the summer, it became clear that WWE was positioning Roman Reigns to face Brock Lesnar for WrestleMania 34. This was clear as day due to the fact that Brock was dropping everyone in sight with one F5. Everyone that went in his way, they never kicked out of that move, not even once. So they were pushing Roman Reigns. One of the ways to elevate Roman to a certain status was having him face John Cena. John Cena at this point was in the twilight of his full-time career. He was kind of full-time, but at the same time was a bit part-time. So he has a certain amount of months he could wrestle. He wrestles full-time during those months, but ends up disappearing. That's what it was. They had the great idea to push John Cena versus Roman Reigns for No Mercy. Now, this match clearly should have happened at WrestleMania or SummerSlam, but the fact that they did it at No Mercy showed that they just want to get it over with. The reason why they want to get it over with was because Roman Reigns needed wins. The build saw John Cena absolutely annihilate and destroy Roman Reigns and his character. It was a destruction of Roman Reigns, the wrestler, and it felt like he had no answer to it. It was basically the worst build that Roman Reigns could have in the year 2017 against John Cena, and this was all despite the fact that we all knew the result eventually. You know, John Cena killed him in the build, he destroyed him, he embarrassed him, and he couldn't really respond. The match itself, barring the fact that it was happening in No Mercy, was a bit tryhard. I didn't think it was that natural with the fact that, like, they were trying to force it to be a classic when the match itself just didn't want to be. Like, on paper, when you look at the match, you see the near falls, all that, it might look like a classic, but it is. I watched it, I didn't really like it that much. I felt like they were trying way too hard here, and the fact that the build felt rushed, the fact that it was happening at No Mercy and all that, it just didn't click. I didn't think it clicked here, but Roman Reigns did get his win here. John Cena shook his hand after the match, and it felt like he was retiring. It was very underwhelming, and they actually did it much better later on with SummerSlam. You know, that was much better. Here, it was rushed, and it just felt like a dream match that they should have waited on. This has to be one of the bigger dream matches that ever happened in the 2000s. It seems kind of weird how they never did it, even for a random episode of Raw or SmackDown. Shawn Michaels had been away from the squared circle for about 8 years up to this point. His retirement was the most graceful in recent memory and provided him the highest point to leave, the main event of WrestleMania 26. HBK had plenty of offers throughout the years to wrestle, and even had potential opponents such as AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan. There wasn't any way to get to Shawn Michaels, it seemed, until WWE Crown Jewel. WWE's deal with Saudi Arabia allowed for plenty of cash flow, and a deal reported to be $50 million per event for 10 years. So they're gonna get about $1 billion out of this deal. 2 events per year. While they couldn't get Yokozuna or the Ultimate Warrior, they settled for Shawn Michaels. I love HBK, one of the best wrestlers of all time, but this match really stands out for the worst possible reasons. Undertaker was near the end of his career, and Kane was slowly putting an end to his as well. They paired these four, and what followed was one of the most tragic wrestling matches of 2018. You saw 4 guys who were once the center of attention put on one of the worst matches in recent years. Triple H tore his pec in the early parts of the match, and to make matters worse, the Brothers of Destruction just couldn't get out of their own rut, and that's because they were years past their best. Triple H was trying hard as hell. He was really trying, but he couldn't really do much because he got hurt and he was away. And so HBK had to be integrated more to the match. HBK was the highlight of the match, but that isn't saying much because if they put you in there, you would probably be the best part of the match. Other than that, this match is a prime example of why sometimes it's better to retire. Shawn got a big ass paycheck for sure, and for as bad as this match was, I still consider WrestleMania 26 to be its last. This wasn't a match, this was a monstrosity of the highest order. If you're like, what makes it bad? There was a lot of mistiming, it was slow, it was plotting. There was moments where Undertaker and Kane should have caught HBK, especially the moonsault part. It was awkward. Triple H was injured, he just wasn't good. Undertaker was cursed with bad matches ever since 2016, and Kane barely wrestled often. Triple H was slower than he was in the past, and Michael still had something in there, but he was associated with this match, so it kind of makes him look worse as well. I do think like if HBK should have been in there with someone else who was a full-time member of the roster, there would have been something a little better there, because those wrestlers could sell more for him and make him look even better than he was. A dream match that isn't talked about much, The Undertaker versus Bill Goldberg. If you're wondering why I mentioned that, throughout Goldberg's run, it's always mentioned that Stone Cold could be his biggest match. Two of the biggest stars of their era clashing. Triple H somewhat because they had problems from before Goldberg even signed to WWE. Brock Lesnar, of course, and barring the Austin match, he did both of those. The Undertaker, though, is not someone who was often talked about as a potential opponent for Goldberg. WWE was back in Saudi Arabia in 2019. It was now another dream match coming to fruition. Unfortunately, this is a duel best left untouched, especially in the year of 2019. To these wrestlers, a match on Super Showdown means they get a huge check. It's simple business, but to the fans, it's terrible. Goldberg might see this match as a huge disappointment, but he got money out of it. With that said, the moment Goldberg banged his head onto that door and suffered a concussion, this match was destined to fail. Even if Goldberg didn't suffer that concussion, they weren't going to deliver. There was plenty of botches and awkward moments throughout the match. The heat was definitely playing a part in their performance here. It's one of the saddest matches you'll ever watch because these two had plenty of respect and honor. I know Goldberg has a bad history in ring, but this was probably his worst performance. Undertaker's history is known, but this one felt like God telling them to wrap it up. I personally would doubt myself in my career if I had a performance like this. They started off hot and there was no problems with the first minute. Then Goldberg tried doing the submission stuff and looked gassed already. He bumped his head into the post at full speed. It was ridiculous and highlighted that this man wasn't in the right frame, let alone right world, to have this match. The tombstone was horrible. Goldberg's brainbuster was world class, except this man was trying to hit a damn jackhammer. This was not supposed to be a brainbuster. Undertaker's disappointment was on full display here, even though he won the match. We thought it was terrible. Who knows what his exact thought in that moment was. Yeah. Alright, those are dream matches we should have asked for. A lot of these matches are down to the timing, personally. Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy could have been better, I know. I think the scenario didn't help it. Dean Ambrose, Brock Lesnar. Brock should have allowed for more time, I think. John Cena and Roman Reigns. Cena wasn't really into it as much, nor was the story that good. And the last two matches, they were just terrible. The last two matches were horrible, so yeah. Alright, what you guys think of these dream matches? Please comment down below, and that's the first video. Make sure you hit the sweet chin music on the like button and perhaps the spear on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.